we just saw the intro video, and it talks about how students today are digital natives, in 20th century classrooms, or 21st century classrooms. Ms. Givens, maybe we can start with you. How do you define what a 21st century classroom is?
Well, a 21st century classroom is one that provides students the opportunities to engage and direct their own learning. I think the video showed it best when it says students are empowered, they're engaged, they have access to projects that allow them to be the creators of their own knowledge. It's no longer the teacher being the dispenser of knowledge and the students asked to sit and get, because this generation of students can't sit still that long and they're not going to listen to someone else impart that knowledge. So that 21st century classroom effectively uses the technology. Doesn't have the technology there because of technology, but because of what it allows the student to be able to do. And the video was such a rich way of explaining the vision that the long-range plan for technology has painted for our schools, and how it takes the engaged teachers and the leaders in those school districts to put that 21st century classroom in place and allow that kind of creativity to happen. When someone walks into that classroom, it's not your typical classroom. It's going to be noisy. There's going to be a lot going on. Kids are going to be up moving around. They're not in those straight little rows anymore, because that's not how they learn. And I think we've all understood that we have to prepare them for their present as well as their future, not ours, because it is very, very different from the way any of us learned, whether it's the way I learned 25 years ago when I was in the classroom or where some of our young people are learning today. It is still very different for these 21st century learners.
And in your mind, what is the difference between, just having technology in the classroom, having the latest equipment, and using it effectively?
Well, again, I think the biggest empowering tool of technology is to put it in the hands of the student and allow them to create. It's not them paging through an electronic version of what we had in print. It's not having them directed on what to do next, what path to take. It's not the old drill and kill software that we all knew about back in the 80s. It's really empowering the student to be creative, to give them the tools that they need, and to effectively use technology to achieve the learning outcomes that have been established for that classroom. It's not just them having fun, it's really addressing the learning outcomes that are identified for that classroom. And as those who are doing this know, once you do that, once you give the student that power, you don't have to worry about how they're going to perform on the tax test or any other tests, because they learned it by doing it, not by sitting and listening to someone else tell them about it.
And Ms. McMullen, Klein ISD, y'all were kind of at the forefront of bringing in digital learning into the classroom. You started 10 years ago. What results have you seen, and what have you learned over the years?
Well, I think clearly, number one, and Anita addressed that very well, to always remember that we really are in the learning business. And so whatever decisions we make about technology truly have to be focused on learning, and what are those learning outcomes that we want for our students. And when you do that, you're not going to go wrong. What we have found, and just as the others mentioned in the video, is that it is a change process over time, but what begins to happen is you do see a higher level of engagement. You do see, as one of our teachers quoted in there, discipline problems go down, attendance goes up. If nothing else happens, that's going to raise scores, because, simply having students in the classroom, having them engaged in what they're doing. But then I think we all know that the best way we learn is to truly learn by doing. And what technology does is empower students to actually do the learning. And to Anita's point as well, it is not the drill and kill. We really believe that the best technology for students starts with a blank page. And that could be a blank word processing page, a blank video file, but something where they then come in, they put their knowledge into that, and they demonstrate their mastery of their learning objectives. And we have seen that, and we too have seen test scores go up, tax scores go up, but more so, just a real joy back in the classroom again, both for teachers and for students. Everybody happy to be there.
And Mr. Gilbert, your district is a little bit different than Klein in that it's a smaller community. It's a more rural community. How did you go about starting a digital learning initiative there?
Well, we do have an advantage by being a smaller district, and it's a lot more than a little bit smaller than Klein. We were talking earlier, at one point in time, they were experiencing growth each year about the size of our district. But we have about 1,400 students. But the main thing that we were able to do was 4 years ago, we wanted this to happen. There was a group of people, including myself, that wanted to see technology in use increase in the classroom, but we didn't want to see, just as has already been said, we just didn't want to see a lot more equipment in the classroom. There needed to be a reason for it to be there, and it needed to be a tool. It didn't need to be the focus. I've been very candid to say I went to a conference and I heard some people at an Apple session, much like this, talk about viral learning. And they used examples like, MySpace, YouTube. There aren't any commercials for those things, and they've grown to be pretty good size. And it was all about the fact that there was product out there that people were interested in. We used that approach in White Oak in that I and some other people, we put the technology in the hands of just a few teachers, actually about 4 or 5 teachers in the district. We put the technology in their hands because we knew they had an interest and we knew they had a skill level that would start that process, and they had an idea of how they wanted to use it in their classroom to enhance learning. And quite frankly, it spread like the plague. Once it started and once those things were happening in the classroom, what we did was we waited for teachers to ask us for the technology. And, the teacher next door, the teacher down the hall, this is going on in the 2nd grade classroom, and the 5th grade teacher says, I hear this is happening. And it started to grow that way. And so it grew with an interest in the classroom instead of a, top-down mandate that it be done. It's grown a great deal. We have a great deal of use in the lower grades. It's moving into our secondary classrooms now, and we're pretty excited about where it's going.
Great. Well, it's hard to have a conversation about education these days without acknowledging the fact that the legislature is in session, and a lot of districts across the state, most districts across the state, are pretty worried about what's going on. Maybe Ms. McMullen and Mr. Gilbert, you guys can talk a little bit about what resources y'all's district has found to implement technological initiatives in the classroom. And Ms. Givens, maybe you can jump in with what other opportunities there are out there to find funding.
You're a brave woman to bring that up. We have been very fortunate in our district as far as funding the hardware piece of this. Our community has been very supportive, and it has been primarily through bond elections. And because, as Mike mentioned, we are a high-growth district, we have had a number of bond elections to build facilities, and technology has been a part of that. And we pay off the technology part of the bond earlier than we do the facilities, and I'll save you the minutia on that. But that has helped tremendously. The technology allotment that we get from the state has been a real driver for our professional development in the district. And we have 40 campuses, and we currently have a core of about 7 district instructional technology teachers who each have a cluster of campuses that they work with and support, but they do a lot of cross-functional work depending on the need and the expertise. So those 2 areas have been primary for us, and then certainly local funds as well.
And we've concentrated more on local funds. We're, like I said, as a small district, we actually have a pretty lean budget, but what we've done is we've taken everything that we do and looked at it through a microscope and made the changes that we need to put the technology in the hands of those that need it. Now, we're not a one-to-one initiative school. Teachers in the classrooms, use the technology, share the technology, but we've just been able to use our local resources and some grants, looking for opportunities to partner with other schools, anything we needed to do to get some of those things in place. We're very fortunate to be a part of a group called SuperNet, and which is a subpart of NetNet that allows us great bandwidth. I don't want to have a conversation about bandwidth, because when I say that word, I about reach the limit of what I know about it. I know we have plenty, and I know that our technology people, Michael Grass and Scott Floyd, do a great job of monitoring that and make sure that's okay. We have grave concerns about where we're headed. once you start this process and once you get people involved in this type of learning, it'll be, it won't be difficult to go back. It'll be impossible. And so it's certainly a concern. I've got a hole in this cheek because I'm being nice. And I was in the Capitol building before I was here, and I actually, I've actually calmed down quite a bit. But the concerns are real. But we're speaking for our district, where we are right now, the technology that we have in place, we may have to hold what we have for a little while and learn to use it even better and expand the use of what we got in place without having to add anything else. But we will not back up on the use of technology, and we will not back up on learning communities and project-based learning, because we, like was said, we feel like we're headed in the right direction.
And Ms. Givens, how is the state encouraging technological initiatives in across districts?
Well, there are a number of ways that we're encouraging districts to leverage the resources that they have and to seek those opportunities where they exist. Probably one of the little-known facts is there is not a single funding stream that goes to school districts that can't be used for technology. You don't have to have a dedicated technology stream in order to buy the equipment and to train teachers. Almost every opportunity that you have for funding provides for tools for the classroom and training for teachers. And if those tools for the classroom are technology tools, and if training is how to use those tools, then those are eligible uses of those resources. We all know that the technology allotment has been in place for 20 years, and districts have come to rely on that dedicated funding stream. We too are over at the Capitol. We know the concerns. On the one hand, folks want all the money in one big pot so they can use it for whatever they think is important. On the other hand, everybody that has something that's important to them wants it dedicated to the thing that they think is important. And so those conversations are going to continue. But as we think about districts leveraging the technology that they already have and showing how well it can be used, it will go a long way to make sure folks don't believe that we just bought the technology and it's still sitting in the back of the classroom as not being utilized. The other thing that we've been trying to help districts understand is there are economies of scale. And Whiteout just mentioned, they're part of a collaborative. There's many things you can do together that you can't do independently simply by joining forces with others. And we have a new grant. There's not many grants out there, but a new grant that was just announced last week. It is Title II Part D funding, which is not as much as we once had, but it's a little over $8 million. And the focus of those technology demonstration grants is connections to Project Share. It's taking what districts are currently doing and connecting that to the resources that the state is providing in Project Share and demonstrating to others how it can work most effectively in the kinds of classrooms in those districts. And so we know that that is one grant opportunity. There are still districts that have quite a bit of stimulus funding left. They have until 2013 to spend it, so they don't have to get in a hurry. But it is there, and it is eligible to be used for technology, so that's another source. Again, almost every single funding source that a district has can be used for the technology tools and for the professional development. We talk about planning first and then taking advantage of the funding that becomes available instead of waiting until the funding is available to begin to plan. And so if there's any advice that we try to give districts, plan for what you want to do and then leverage every resource that becomes available to make your vision a reality.
And I guess, we can talk a little bit more about the experiences of White Oak and Klein, and what are some of the hurdles that you've had to overcome in trying to get trying to get more technology into the classroom and to use it in an effective manner?
Well, I think the second part of the question for me is the most important. It's using it in the most effective manner. Basically all you really need to do to get technology in the classroom is find a line item in the budget, fill out a PO, and send it off. And there are companies all over the place that will send you what you want if you'll pay for it. So, that, and I think that's a fear that a lot of people have, that's what schools have done. They've just, loaded up a classroom with a lot of materials or a lot of hardware. And, we discussed this a little bit earlier, and that the kids are in there, playing video games or doing things like that. what we have done, and it goes also to what Ms. Gibbons was saying, is we've started this project with a needs assessment. You know, we went through every teacher and every campus, and we had every principal turn in, you know, not only what do you want, but why do you want it and how you're going to use it. And then as our district site-based team looked at all that, you prioritize those needs, and then we started targeting those areas and putting that technology in based on the needs, so that when the hardware went into the room, the teacher was still the focus of the classroom. The hardware was a tool being used to reach the educational goal they wanted. As far as difficulties are concerned, to this point, it's been a matter of prioritizing. You know, if you're going to spend money on iPod touches and iPads, you're going to choose something that you're not spending money on. And and each district is unique, and each district has its own, characteristics, so you'd make those decisions for yourself.
I would say our approach was somewhat similar, even though a little bit earlier. When we started in Klein with the whole path with technology, we started in late 90s, early 2000s with the TIF and TIE grants and things that were available at that time. And that's how we began to see just a little sprinkle of it as teachers who were interested in pursuing that received those grants and got the technology in their classroom. And as we started to monitor what was happening, it was clear that there was a fundamental difference and for the better, and that we needed to do more with that. So in 2001, our superintendent pulled one teacher from each of our elementary schools, and at that time we had 19, and they were pulled for 2.5 days a week. And they had a buddy teacher who taught their class for those 2.5 days a week. And for 2.5 days a week for the spring semester, they were charged with 2 tasks. 1, study brain-based learning, and 2, design a model classroom for 21st century learning. And quite honestly, the charge from the superintendent to those of us who worked in the central office was stay out of their way, and if they need your help, they'll ask for it. This was really to be teacher-led and teacher-driven, and I know that they did a similar approach in White Oak. The teachers have got to be the one driving this process. And so those teachers did that, and at the end of the semester, they came up with their list of things that they wanted in their classroom. And the superintendent said yes, and when the chief financial officer got off the floor, he also said yes, but it was quite an investment at that time. And so the following year at every one of those schools, students were put into the classroom of what we called it our TIP program, which was before the TEA TIP program, but it was our technology integration project. And so students were randomly assigned to those classrooms. They were a mix of gifted and special needs and regular and everybody in between. And then we had a like classroom at the same grade level at every one of those schools. And we hired an outside evaluator to come in for a year and follow the process of the children in the technology-enriched classrooms and make a comparison with the children who were in our more traditional Klein method of teaching. And overwhelmingly, the data at the end came back that across the board, including parent forums and so forth, it was just stronger, it was better. Principals told you could feel the difference walking into one of those classrooms compared to our more traditional classrooms. So then it became a matter of equity. How can you look a parent in the face and say, we know this is better, but I'm sorry, this teacher hasn't stepped up and doesn't really want to mess with technology, so I'm sorry your child's in that classroom, and maybe next year they'll be in another classroom. So we put in place what we call our Technology Baseline Standard Initiative, which was to simply put a suite of technology tools that included the interactive whiteboard, computers in the classroom, response system for assessment, projector, document camera. You don't do that overnight. It's been a process that we have now finished. We started in 2006, and we now have K through 12, all core content classrooms have that. But one of the other things that begins to happen, back to your positive virus, is that once you start down that path with technology, then pretty much they want more. And that's how we evolved into our one-to-one program with, just the issue of access. But I think at the basis, teacher-led, teacher-driven, and your curriculum department has to be on board. This cannot be separate from doing math, science, language arts, and social studies. It truly has to be infused in all of that, fine arts and everything else.
Well, that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, how do you what's the best way, maybe Ms. Givens, you have a response to this, but what is the best way to encourage teachers who are wary of the technology? They might not be familiar with the new equipment that's in their classrooms. How do you bring them in and get them excited about this?
Probably the one thing that we find works best is for them to visit a classroom where it's happening. They need to see it, experience it, and talk to that teacher who is doing it. And it needs to be a classroom of students very much like theirs, because most teachers say, yeah, that works for you, but that's not the kind of kids that I teach. They really need to see it working. And there's a number of opportunities and events across the state, within a district, within a campus, for teachers to really visit other classrooms and see for themselves. And then as we look at where our parents want their students to be, many teachers are brought into this environment because the parents see the need for their students to have those opportunities. But it's kind of seeing is believing, and having that colleague that helps them understand. I think many of our teachers are overcoming their fear of the technology. Particularly some of my colleagues, it's because their grandchildren walk in at age 3 or 4 and say, Grandma, can I see your iPad, or can I have your iPhone, or turn on the computer for me? They're beginning to see that this is what the students need, and that's helping them understand that it's time for them to change.
We've seen this. The thing that's helped us the most is, well, there's two parts to it in White Oak. One, most of our teachers that maybe are not interested in technology do go to the softball field, and they do watch their grandchildren play softball, and they're the parents of their students sit all around them and ask them questions about why this is going on in somebody's room and not going on in theirs. So we have some kind of informal teacher conferences that go on all the time. And, and I'll be the first one to tell you that, in this case, peer pressure is a neat thing. It's good for education. But the other thing is that you have a spirit amongst teachers. They want to teach children, but the teachers that are truly immersed in the technology and really believe in it, they want to teach the teachers too. And we have, as this project began with us and as this process started, at least once and sometimes twice a week, I know that our teachers would be in the school until 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening doing their own in-service. They were teaching each other. They were sharing, this is what I did today. Or, the teacher that doesn't, not quite sold on it yet. Look, let me show you what our kids did. And we're small enough that all of our teachers know all of our kids. And so when you know that Johnny's, produced this kind of data, and he's put this kind of content on the internet, the other teacher that maybe is not sold yet knows that Johnny's just like kids in her room. And she knows that it's something that can be done. So it's not, in my mind, it's not done in such a way, in our setting that they're beat over the head with it. Good teachers want to do good things for kids. And some of them, I'll be the first one to tell you, some of them are harder to sell than others. And where we are in this process right now, my answer to that is we don't discount good teaching just because they're not wanting to turn on a lot of technology in the room. We see the value of a teacher and what the teacher does for the children, but we also have all of the processes in place, be it, they go to a lab, or they get with an instructional technology person where those students aren't missing out on that, and we're bringing that teacher along in the process.
Megan, if I could just add to the concept of that level of professional development, and it's one of the things that we are really growing in our district is this concept of model classrooms. And we have a setup at several of our schools where the administrators have set up a rotation. And today, your classroom may be the model classroom, and there may be 5 or 6 teachers who come to your classroom during their planning period today to watch what you are doing and to watch really what's working and what's not working, because you can learn a lot from things that aren't quite going well. But to have that level of trust in that community within that school takes a little while to build that up. But once that's there, it's a really powerful way of doing professional development. And quite honestly, in tough economic times, it is a very economical way of doing professional development. And as the teachers become the model classroom for the day, there's a process for doing that. And they're actually using a wiki space where they're posting their lessons, they're having their collaboration afterwards. There are 3 questions that their administrator has put on the wiki that they need to answer after they visit a model classroom. So to Anita's point and to Mike's about really seeing what is happening in the classroom. And I think one of the things I always encourage to teachers when they go to view another classroom is, yes, it's important to look at what the teacher is doing, but watch the faces of the children, because that's where you get the hook. I mean, it's really hard to say, I don't think I'm going to do that, when you see the joy on the faces of the kids and the learning and the power of what they're doing. So I encourage you, and we're happy to share the model classroom format with you, but you can pretty well figure out how that might work for you as well.
Well, that's because we talked about the cost of bringing technology into the classroom, but there also must be savings in some areas. Have you guys experienced that in your districts, or Ms. Givens, do you have anything to say on that topic?
Well, let me just start by one of the things that I mentioned earlier in the spotlight session. The fact that the legislature recognized that professional development is really, really important, but it's costly to bring teachers together in face-to-face settings. There are just many costs associated with that practice. Not to say that we don't want to do it when we can, but by providing those experiences in a technological environment saves money. It provides opportunities, and for some districts, it saves money that they didn't have to spend in the first place. But for others, it really is a cost savings. And so there's many things that we can do once and replicate many times instead of having to do over and over again. And so for every district, it's looking at where they can save. And quite honestly, in most of the technology-rich classrooms that I've visited, you don't see as much paper. You don't see as much of the traditional things that you used to spend a lot of money replacing because you consumed them. And so I think it's different in each situation, but there are some economies of doing things with technology that are less expensive than doing them in a traditional fashion.
I would say we have certainly found the paper issue to be true. And in fact, at one of our one-to-one high schools, one of the administrators mentioned recently that normally this time of the year, they would be into their third order of paper, and they are still dealing with the first order from the beginning of the year. And for those of you from an elementary background, this I don't know if you have Tuesday folders or Wednesday folders, but our Tuesday and Wednesday folders are going away, and they are posting on the website the flyers that would normally go home. And quite honestly, as we found students doing more and more of their work digitally, there wasn't a worksheet to send home in the Tuesday folder, So yes, on print cost, we are beginning to see that as well.
I think it's print costs, and it's also time savings. We're doing a lot of the same thing, posting material. We're using Moodle for a lot of our lessons, and you can actually set those up where the students finish them and they're graded. And I don't know that there's an elementary teacher anywhere that wouldn't be interested in something where they didn't bring home a satchel full of papers every night to grade. Where there's some instant feedback there, and so not only is it paper, but it's time savings. And you can get into your lessons deeper, and you can be a little bit more relaxed about the process. So, and I will tell you, along the lines of the use of Moodle and the use of those other things, that also allows your teachers to share even that much more. Once you start putting content on the web, once you start putting it out there in blogs, the different places that you can put it. We find ourselves sharing not only amongst our own teachers but others. At the TCA conference, my wife came with me to that, and she teaches a different district than I do, and she was expressing an issue that she was having with something, and one of my technology teachers was just listening to her, and by the time she had finished explaining what the problem was, my elementary instructional technologist had emailed her a setup for a Moodle lesson that would take care of it. And it was in a matter of like 2 minutes. And so my wife was impressed with her, not,
And you for hiring that person.
little credit at home.
And for districts that are just embarking on bringing technology into the classroom, and are just kind of figuring it out how to do it, how quickly can they start to see results from it, and what kind of student achievement results or other kind of positive things can they expect?
The results are immediate. I mean, literally, you can pick up something. You can pick up a tidbit, just something that you want to do I'll use the example of the TCA conference. We at White Oak, we believe in that a great deal. I can send teachers to that conference and they spend 3 days there, whatever it is, Thursday through Saturday. Their classroom changes on Monday, and whether or not they've got a great deal of technology in the room already or not, there's always something that can be added. And that change may be in an instructional style. It may be in a process that they use to present the lesson. It may be in a way that they allow the children to do something with the technology that we have available. But I don't know that there's anything that I've seen in my 30 years in education that can change a classroom quicker than what's going on. And I think part of that's something that we've all discussed here is your students are ready and they have enough skills to pick up what you're wanting to do, and you have to be comfortable enough with the fact that they're going to pick it up faster than you can teach them. I'm way old school teacher. I was the guy that could teach any subject if I had a book and a 10-minute head start and an understanding with the students that they not read ahead. But that has all changed now, and it's not about presenting material. It's about facilitating learning.
And I think, Megan, that's the key. It really is about a change in pedagogy. It is a change in the way you do instruction. If you bring technology into the classroom, but you still plan to lecture, then don't bother, because it's going to interfere with your lecture, quite honestly. But if you change it so that, you're doing more small group instruction, which is part of the reason we put our package in, was to really bust up the rows, as Anita talked about earlier, and just have a lot of different centers, even in high school classrooms, going on, and students moving from one to the other. And then also the ability to address individual needs of students, which one teacher with 25, 27 children cannot do that, I believe, without the technology. It is really the only way you can really target personalized learning to students. And so that's a change in how you approach teaching as well.
And Ms. Givens, has the TEA seen any change in the performance of students in districts that have really brought technology into their classrooms?
Well, one of the things that we certainly do observe is schools like White Oak and Klein and others that have very strong technology programs, because they're willing to share with us the improvements that they're seeing in their TAC scores and in other levels of achievement. But the other thing that we're seeing across the state as well is we've put a lot of different things in place in schools. And yet we know that on the current accountability system, more and more of our students are being successful each and every year in the things that we measure. And so whether it's just the technology or a combination of the technology and many other factors, it's really hard to say, because you don't put technology in the classroom and stop doing all the other things that you were doing. But if you combine all of those things, it's that aggregation of all of those tools. We are seeing improvements in student performance on many, many measures, and just recently have seen the improvements on AP exams, on SAT scores, on more and more students taking ACTs. There's any number of measures that we're seeing improvements amongst many different student groups that we had not seen before. So collectively, I think as a state, we can see that it's making a difference across the board.
Can I just add, Megan, one of the other things that technology allows us to do on the teacher end side is to really look at data in a way that we never could. And I think many teachers who went into the profession as long ago as I did never thought they would be data mining in the way that they are now. But when various digital programs that you use give you the data on what students did it and how they did it and who mastered this piece and which student expectation do we need to focus again, I think that's part of why you're seeing the increase in success in test scores that Anita mentioned. It is the ability to really know what's going on and do something about it in a timely manner.
So in the next 5 years, where do you see White Oak, where do you see Klein as far as technology in the classroom? What's still left for y'all to accomplish?
Well, I think for White Oak, we want to be like Klein. But I think it's a continued growth. I would like to continue to see our teachers change the way they teach, become more project-based learning oriented, and we're looking at and doing more training along those lines. Seeing more of the things that are going on with student-driven projects where, I like, the way it was said, you give the student a blank page, whether it's, whatever the blank page is, and you give them the main idea and see where they go with it. I'd like to see more of those things happen. I would very much like to see our school district, be able to continue to provide the materials and the things necessary to attract, keep, and inspire good teachers, because that's what helps make our students successful. So there are all kinds of concerns right now, but what I've told people, one thing I know for a fact is, come August, we're going to open the doors and roll some kind of buses, and we're going to get out there and pick our kids up and have school. But they can't come back to the way it was. This started for me a long time ago, and I think it was a Time article, and for time purposes, basically it was a deal. It was many of you may have heard this, the Rip Van Winkle story, where he woke up in the 20th century and all the things that scared him until he went into a school, and then he felt fine, because everything's just the way it was, and that's really bothered me. I mean, and I don't want that to happen in White Oak.
I see in the next 5 years, we're all really at different levels, but all just really at the tip of the iceberg also. And the four walls of the school building are going away. The set manner of pushing everybody through at the same pace at the same time is going away. And so I see technology driving a lot of that, and I really don't know quite what it's going to look like, but it's going to be very, very different. We hope to just continue our one-to-one program. We have it in place at 4 schools. That means we've got 36 more to go, and we'd like to do that and move that along in some form or another, because we do see scores going up almost in the first year of implementation as we watch our data. So we'd like to do that. But technology changes so rapidly, and keeping up with that change and still bringing teachers along is, a little tug that we continue to work with, because as soon as they're comfortable with one thing, something else is there.
And Ms. Givens, what do you see as the future for educational technology for the state? Where does the state need to be working towards?
Well, I think the state has to continue to look at our long-range plan for technology to make sure that the vision we have for 2020 is still the right vision and that we're headed down the right path. But I think Mike and Ann are correct. We can't depend on the type of technology, because the technology is going to change. I mean, how many of you have the same kind of cell phone now that you had a year ago? I mean, we practically throw them away and get the new one, because it's not the technology device itself that's so important. It's the functions and the opportunities that it brings. And so education has to be ready to embrace what technology can do, whatever form that technology might take, but improve student learning outcomes so that our students do go through our K-12 system prepared for what's next for them, and that they're not waiting until they get out of school to decide where they want to go next. They've already had those experiences. And I think the path that we're on to make sure that every student is college and career ready, whether they go to college right after high school, whether they go into a career and then post-secondary education, or a combination of both. They are the ones who are going to be making the decisions that's going to drive what the rest of our life is going to be like. And so we want to empower them to make the very best decisions that they can make, and they need to be critical thinkers. They need to be problem solvers. They don't need to be someone waiting for someone else to tell them what to do next. They need to be the ones with the creativity to invent the future that we're going to live in. And so I think looking at it from that perspective, and knowing that by 2020, some of those kids that are in our classrooms today are going to be the leaders making the decisions that we're going to be experiencing, gives us hope for the future that's going to be a very bright one.
Okay, well, we have reserved the last 10 minutes or so for questions from the audience. If anybody has something they'd want to ask, right here.
For Ms. Givens, do you foresee the state mandating a sort of tax test for technology at any point?
Actually, I don't, because I don't think the technology is what we need to test students on their knowledge of. The technology changed so rapidly. Some of you may know that we started down that path many years ago, and by the time we had the test ready, the technology we built it on was obsolete. And so it's not really about the technology. I think that the tests that we give our students need to measure what they have learned. I said once upon a time that we've learned to value what's easy to assess. Now we need to learn to assess what we really value. And I think the technology is going to allow us to do that. But we want to assess what they've learned, not what technology tool they use to do it.
Yes, I know that there are a lot of grants out there that are geared for middle school and high school students. And I'm not familiar with any for the primary and elementary grades. Do you see any of that coming, or is there something out there that I don't know about? Because we kind of feel left behind. There's nothing for the little ones as far as grants.
Well, all of the grant programs at the agency are driven by the statute or the funding source that supports those. And so as we look at the future for grants, it's not very bright right now because it doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of new grants from the federal level or from the state level. But grants from private foundations and from other sources really do address all grade levels and all opportunities. And so one of the things that we want to be able to do is point people to those grant opportunities that are not necessarily those that come through the Texas Education Agency or through the U.S. Department of Education. But the focus for the last several years has been on middle school and high school to make sure those students do leave our schools college and career ready. Probably 10 years ago, the focus was on K-8. We can't quite seem to focus on all 12 grades or 13 grades and all 4.8 million students at the same time. But we hear you and we know that there's lots of opportunities and one size doesn't always fit all.
Yes.
One of the things that bothers me the most about all of this is that we continue to grade everything we do in schools based on the state test. That seems to be the realm that we continue, no matter what we do in changing the way we teach, or the things that we think need to be valued. Is there a way of taking a look at really what our goals are and making people continually improving in all the things like values, ethics, rather than just how they read, write, and do their history?
I would say we do that internally. You know, when we talk externally, we have to talk a common language, and the common language that we all have is the state assessment. But what we do internally, because we have strong, part of our mission statement is around character education, and so that's a strong program within the district. So we really do internally, and I think this would be true in White Oak as well, you're really developing the whole child, and you are constantly evaluating where we are with that, with the whole child. But at a state level, we have that one measure that we all are aware of.
I would agree, and I just would add that, you know, we do have to address the things that are in the paper. You know, and you know, it doesn't matter whether you're 40,000 students or 1,400. Somewhere down the road, there's going to be an article in the paper, and there's going to be a list of schools, and there's going to be a set of numbers beside it, and you know, and people like me have to talk to 7 board members about where we are on that list. So, you know, but we do have, you know, I think there's something that, you know, we do have good teachers, and they are teaching character, and they are doing those things. I would like to see some, you know, just personally, I'd like to see us ease up on assessment a bit. I think we need it. I think we have to be accountable, but I don't know that we need it as much as we're getting it right now.
And there's back row there.
Kind of a two-part question. The first one has to do with the current economic outlook. Are you all looking at more of a bring your own technology kind of approach rather than trying to be able to purchase technology? And then secondly, related to that, students, talking about model classrooms a little while ago as a sort of a professional development model. How much do you incorporate your students into co-learning with teachers or teaching teachers as you're going along through this process?
I'll take the second question first. Anytime you have teachers and students in a classroom together, and really we're trying to move our classrooms to be sort of learning communities, which means that the students are sometimes the teacher and the teacher is sometimes the learner, particularly when it comes to technology, and that's very empowering for students to be able to do that. We never lose sight of the fact that the teacher is the content expert and the teacher is the expert in instruction. But there are ways that students can say, hey, look at this, let's try this, can we do this? And that happens all the time, so they do that. in the current to your question about devices, and I will tell you, and my IT director is sitting in the audience today, so this is a conversation we have frequently about devices and what device needs to come. And part of the challenge with Bring Your Own Device is, does it run the reading program we're doing today? You know, so those are some of the things we're looking at, and we're going to have to continue to explore it and see, because we are still constrained by time, and we've got to be hit a certain point at a certain level, and so we need to get people going there. I think more and more we're going to be moving in that direction. My bottom line is, how does this impact instruction? If it works, great. If it's going to be a negative, because now I'm a teacher not only managing 30 kids but 30 different devices, and how do I get them there, then that may not be the most productive thing. But it's a fair question, and it's one we're going to have to continue to look at.
I would say as we continue in this process and we look at the things that we're being faced with at the state level and, and beyond, I guess, there's always been a conversation, always will be a conversation about, students bringing their own devices. For the most part, it really doesn't matter what school or what socioeconomic level you're in. You've got kids that can bring better technology into the school than you can provide for them. And there needs to be a place where, in my mind, there needs to be a place where they can use that. Maybe not all the time, maybe not in every classroom, but at certain times during the day, in certain classes or certain project-based lessons, they need to be able to pull those things out and use their materials and sit with the neighbor next door or the student that can't afford that phone, put the two of them together. I think you're going to see more of that. I'll tell you that when we started this process, and with some of those teachers that I was talking about that was very excited about this, I walked into a classroom one time, and there was a yardstick hanging down from a ceiling like this with a Wii Fit remote control taped to it with duct tape pointed at a piece of, like just white, dry erase board, and they'd created their own interactive board. Now, don't ask me how they did that. I will tell you that it was pretty neat. But, teachers that are excited about doing that, and I think this is a good thing and a bad thing. Teachers that are excited about this process are going to find a way to continue. Unfortunately, many of them may have to find a way to continue, and they're going to be spending their own money to get that done. That's not ideal, but that's what this profession's been like for a long, long time.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions.
Well, mine was kind of jumping off of his, but then also that other one. Trying to teach, spending any time, or either of your districts spending any amount of time teaching good digital citizenship. I just personally, the last week, I've been on Vocal because we're setting up a live broadcast for some announcements for our elementary. And I've been on there in the middle of the afternoon, and there have been like young kids. I jumped on this thing that said question and answer time, and one was tech time with Timmy, and these were like 10, very knowledgeable, but 10-year-old kids that were asking me to co-host with them. And I'm like, I'm not gonna but I was conversing with them, are you being safe on the internet? And it's really concerning me because I think we're probably about to go to a Bring Your Own Device initiative, and I think we've got to get some good digital citizenship teaching out there. And I was just wondering if you all had started really focusing on that.
In the full video that you'll see, my elementary instructional technology person goes through her whole process of getting your digital driver's license. And they go through the process, they take a test, that gives them their learner's permit, then they have to go further through the process, they get their driver's license, and then when they're caught doing something they're not supposed to, we take their driver's license away. And it's a part of that process. But, there's 2 parts to that. We are teaching that, and we're teaching it at all levels about, and with the technology, that opens that teachable moment about, that process. But we're also, we're very cognitive of the fact that, and I've had this conversation with people before, that still the best filter that there is in school business is a teacher actively engaged with their kids and monitoring what's going on. Of course, we're SIPA compliant at White Oak. We've got the things in place to protect our kids. We've opened ours up to a lot of Web 2.0 tools because it facilitates what we want to do in learning. But, I've said for years, filters work on me. I get to a certain place and the filter says that site's blocked and, it's blocked and I go somewhere else. But, that's not the way it is with kids. So it's about monitoring and, my old saying is that, we've never had a filter for smoking in the bathroom at the high school. We just kind of have to catch them. And,
What about like for parents? Because like both of these kids, we asked them, do your parents know you're doing this? And Timmy said, yes, sort of, but they don't really know I'm on here right now.
and they're at home?
They were both at home. Now, it was later in the afternoon, so if they were on the East Coast, well, Timmy was homesick that day. But
There
now
you
the
go.
one that was last Friday, it was probably around 3, so he could have already been out of school, and I didn't really go there with him, but I specifically asked him, do your parents know you're doing this? Well, yes and no, they just don't know I'm on right now. And so, that was the other thing is wanting to try to facilitate something with a community.
Yes, and parent
Initiative.
education is key, and you need to bring that in. In our district, it was our librarian media specialist who put together our digital citizenship curriculum, and they teach it on every campus. But it really has to be an everyday thing, and truly it goes back to the gentleman's question almost along with character ed. It's not a separate topic. It is just something you live and breathe every day, but you have to get to that point where people understand what you mean by digital citizenship and how that works. And then we have to understand that technology never invented inappropriate behavior, that kids have had inappropriate behavior long before technology, and just as we dealt with it prior to technology, we have to deal with it now, because we are still dealing with young children and adolescents, and sometimes they don't make the best choices, but we have to keep working with them through that. But you're absolutely right, and the parent education piece is key. It really is.
Robin.
So just one last question. We're all here because of Power On Texas. So how do you feel Power On Texas plays a role in educational technology?
For us, and just from what you'll see in the video and the things that are going on there, anything that ties school districts together, anything that shows what's happening in this case, whatever it is, 7, 8 different places, it's a validation to what you're doing in your district. As much as we talk to each other, as much as we do those things, when you make a decision that you're going to go into this process and you're going to empower your teachers to use technology, and you're going to open those portals and let them use 2.0 tools, and you're going to do these things for your children, you feel like, and you're doing the right thing. It always makes you feel real good to find out that there's another school district that's out there with you, and that, you're not just getting that phone call from somebody in town that says, how irresponsible you're being and how much harm you're doing to the kids. And of course, that has to do with just about all the decisions we make at times. But it's excellent to share this process, to put something out there that can be built on from here, and you just continue. It's another larger, I think, educational community.
I would just say real quickly, and it goes to the parent piece, I think what Power On Texas can do is educate the community at large about the power of technology in education. And particularly in this year, it is important that communities, parents, everyone, when they see that and they say, gee, I would like that for my child, so that they then go have that conversation with their school board, with their superintendent, with their legislators, and say, now I get what it really looks like. So I thank you for putting that out there so that people have that opportunity.
Absolutely.
Well, this concludes our panel. I want to thank all of y'all for coming, and really encourage you to go see the full documentary tonight, which is at 8:30 in the Grand Ballroom on level 3. And then in your spare time, you can also visit powerontexas.com, and there you can find full detailed profiles of 7 districts, including Klein and White Oak, that have really embraced technology. So, thanks.
Thank you.